everyone, and welcome to the Data Effect, Canada's digital imperative, brought to you by CityAge and Canada's digital supercluster. Over the last 18 months, Canadian industry has rapidly digitized, proving that we have the ability to lead the world in tech innovation. We have enormous opportunity in front of us, and with the help of today's speakers, we can seize it. I'm Naomi Parnas, CityAge's anchor and the co-founder of KPW Communications, and I am so pleased to be here with you today. We have over 350 delegates from across the country joining us. Thank you all for being here as we unlock Canada's digital potential. Please note that today's show is being recorded and we will distribute it to all attendees at a later date. Now, before we get started, just a few quick notes about the comments section. When you comment in the chat section, make sure to direct your comments to everyone. This way, everyone can engage and we can all read your comments. The default setting right now directs messages just to panelists. So you're going to want to change that so that everyone can see what you have to say. Please put your questions in the Q&A section of Zoom for the panelists to answer. If we don't get to them during the event, CityAge will get answers for you afterwards and share them with you. Now, we want to make this event as interactive as possible. So if everyone could take a moment, tell us your name and where you're Zooming from, that would be great. I know we always have people from all over, so it would be great to see where you're coming from today. And before we begin, here's a question for our audience. We're going to do our first poll question. The question is, what is Canada's biggest digital strength? So there you go. You can see the results on the screen. Vote, and then we'll tell you the results when we come back a little bit after some of our speakers. So you can take a look at the answers there and make your vote. Now let's start the show. Our first guest is an economist and partner at the McKinsey Global Institute. She leads research on productivity, competitiveness, and growth, and has assessed the economies in the US, Mexico, Brazil, Canada, the UK, Finland, Sweden, and South Korea. One of her long-term research interests is in productivity prospects in the digital age. And she's here to kick off our conversation. Please welcome Jaana Remes. Jaana?
Thank you, Naomi, and thank you all of our old friends from CityAge. Really appreciate you inviting me to join back on the conversation. And one of the most interesting things about the moment we are living in a crisis like the COVID crisis. And sorry, I'm going to put this into a full screen mode. Apologies there. The COVID crisis is something we have not seen ever before. And it has changed things for most people around the globe. We are reflecting in our lives what is going to be coming when we go ahead. And it really is a moment for leaders to reimagine how to serve customers, adjust where and how work is done, and make investments that shape productivity and growth for years to come. So to be able to kind of understand what the parameters are around how the digital future could look like, we have spent quite a bit of time studying both companies, their business processes on serving customers, as well as how they work with their workers, as well as consumers, to try to gauge what the range of options might be going forward. And what I'll do in the next less than 15 minutes is to share some of the lessons we have learned around the globe and hopefully leave you with some thoughts on what that might mean for Canada. So to start, what were the things that really changed in COVID? I think you are all familiar with some of these changes. First of all, the way we work has changed quite substantially. And many of these things will continue to have an impact for the longer term. A large share, roughly almost half of people were able to work from home overall in North America, for example. And we expect that some of that working from home will stay. First of all, companies are keen to save on real estate. They certainly realize that they can downsize some of the most expensive real estate in large cities, but also they learned to work from a distance. You could do more things over Zoom like we do today. And perhaps most importantly, a lot of workers liked it. They didn't need to spend as much time on commuting, and they were able to kind of sleep longer for not having to wake up as early, exercise, to stay on. Their quality of life changed. So we expect that to lead, on average, for those people who can work from home, to 1 day a week more working away from the office. So that's a pretty substantial shift. Okay, perfect. Thank you. The second big change is that we obviously stopped business travel, and we expect some of that will stay again for the same reasons. We can do things at the distance, particularly internal meetings, trainings, etc. We expect that we'll see about 20% less business travel in the future in the long term. The one thing that won't change will be leisure travel. I think there are large segments of the consumer base that really are keen to get back, baby boomers being one of the main folks who are keen to travel in their golden years, but so are young folks as well. So we expect that to come back potentially with a real bounce in the near term when some of the challenges move away. The second one was move of commerce into digital. E-commerce penetration increased dramatically. This happened on any kind of retail sales, but also on movies, entertainment, etc. It is quite clear that even some movie theaters moved away from launching in theaters only to launching digitally. Restaurant delivery, online grocery, both of those increased, especially because some of the folks who might never have adopted to buy groceries online, particularly older consumers, were now prompted to do that.
Do your best.
Was that for me? Particularly some of the baby boomers, older consumers who might have lived the last 20 to 30 years of their lives never buying groceries online, now had a very strong nudge to do so, and they liked what they saw. So we basically saw a shift of some of the consumer segments to activities they might not have otherwise ever tried. Online education, it won't happen in K2 through 12 as much as obviously it was not a great experience for most students or teachers. However, it prompted a lot of innovation on the services side, and especially on higher education. We expect that this was a real nudge to do more. Telemedicine, the other area where we saw big changes, clearly the fact that we saw 15% of online or phone consultation go to 85%, for example, in the UK health system. Not all of that is going to stay, but the fact that we did see some of that shift, some folks will prefer that to having to travel to their doctor's appointment. So clearly, working from home, working away from the office, e-commerce, and then in the longer term at the businesses, they are investing on different processes that happened in service robots, or that happened in the fact that you can order on an iPad instead of having to talk to a person, or you can have more automation in places like food processing, where you had some of the COVID shifts happen, and basically people were losing their opportunities to work in the office. So for all of these reasons, we are going to see a shift from the past in the digital world. And we expect to see even more of that. When we talk to executives, they expect acceleration in automation and technology, in reorganization and agility, particularly now with the supply chain changes, etc. This is not going to stop. They realized what they can do in COVID. So for example, Dick's Sporting Goods, after their stores were closed, were able to start curbside delivery in 2 days, something that they had planned to do and thought it was going to take them 18 months. A telecoms provider, for example, started a virtual collaboration tool that enabled them to actually completely get rid of some of the engineering visits for maintenance. There was a lot of learning on companies, and that will continue to happen. So when we looked across the board on these different industries, what was going to happen, what was the potential of productivity improvement, we estimated that overall, in the next 5 years, we have the potential to add a percentage point to productivity growth, simply because of the fact that we've got such a niche and that if it continues, we really have a potential of reversing some of the slow productivity growth. I've already talked about healthcare. Another example was there was a lot more self-diagnosis, tracking, digital tools to track whether it's your blood sugar level or your blood pressure, etc. These actually help you avoid having to go to the doctor for checkups. Construction, a long time laggard in industry. Many are forced to digitalize, start using modular tools, etc., because of the fact that they were having a harder time getting workforce, for example. And I give you many other examples. Pharmaceuticals would be another industry where clearly the great success of innovation had opened people's eyes on how things can be done a lot faster. And overall, when you look across the board, it really is a percentage point productivity boost over 5 years, which is pretty stunning. So that's one part of when we are looking at today's businesses. How about dynamism, the creative destruction that oftentimes is another core part of the productivity growth? There again, we saw on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see what happened to business bankruptcies. They declined across the board in different countries, mostly because government stepped in to support what was going on. New business creation actually grew in United States and Sweden very substantially. Lots of folks, when they were staying at home, were rethinking how they want to live their life and what they want to do, and were starting businesses. Many of these are single-person businesses, but as many are actually real businesses that the US BLS, BA and BLS estimate as the growth potential ones that are going to be employers for others. This has not happened across the board. Italy, Spain, Southern Europe in particular, saw a real decline in business creation. So what does this mean? That means that we have the supply side potential for dramatically increasing productivity, but that does not mean we are going to necessarily see that come and be realized. The reason is that a lot of this change needs to happen across the board, across a large number of companies. You need to really see a broad-based and sustained acceleration. And also you need to see the demand side do its share, because if you don't see sustained demand growth, companies don't have the incentives to invest on some of the more productive solutions. And you don't see the kind of productivity growth translating the wage growth, translating into more demand, translating to more incentives to invest, and that kind of virtuous cycle of growth. And we have seen that in the past. And what we have done here on this chart is describe the kind of patterns we could see. On the left-hand side, you have not a lot of investments on new innovation and not a lot of demand growth, which would be the lost decade of Japan, for example. On the other end of the extreme, we have the post-World War II story in the US and Western Europe, where you really saw both huge amount of investment, innovation, and huge demand growth, as you saw particularly the rising middle class, investments on education, etc. And the question is, we think we have the potential of getting into the supply side. The big question is, are we getting that broadly enough so that it's going to be sustained and substantial? And is it going to be accompanied by the demand side impact? And to date, unfortunately, on the supply side, the productivity gains and the digital innovations have been very focused on the superstars. 2/3 of the R&D investment increase that came with the COVID came from those large superstars. And the superstars were the ones who didn't lose their revenues, while all other businesses lost 11% of their revenues compared to the pre-pandemic period. So for that reason, one of the critical challenges for us is to make sure that the digital innovations go broadly into mid-sized companies, SMEs, and that we get the incentives for people to invest across the board. Without that, we won't get the perfect virtuous cycle going. The second question is, will the demand be there? In the short run, the answer is a resounding yes. The fact that even though pandemic, a lot of people lost their jobs, you saw many others who were able to work from home, maintain their income, and were not able to spend as they had planned. And that meant that household savings across the Western world grew dramatically. In Canada, for example, the Bank of Canada estimates that on average, Canadian households were able to save almost 6,000 Canadian dollars more in 2020 than they did in 2019, simply because of this fact. It also meant that the people who were lost their jobs, for example, in service sector jobs, the stimulus support was exceptionally robust and sustained their demand, etc. Their demand to their capacity to spend, etc. The big question here is, how long will those savings last? For the wealthier segments, the middle class and upper middle class, it will probably last for quite a while. The big open question is the lower income segments, because when the stimulus funding ends, jobs in most places are not yet where they were before. the good news is that we are seeing some upward pressure on wages because of the tight labor markets. But the question is, how will that continue? And we won't again get to the virtuous cycle of supply investments that increase productivity and purchasing power and growth unless we see also broad-based income and demand growth. So that really is the thing, how we are looking at the world. What would it take for us to go from where we are today and sustain that growth? And I think I'll start from the right-hand side of the next slide. We clearly need to sustain and broaden the innovation. We need to get really a full ecosystem, not just the large companies, but their suppliers, the small and medium-sized businesses, all of them to innovate on digitalization. We need to build up skills so that we are able to take advantage of many of the digital tools. We need to look at where there might be some bottlenecks on labor and product market regulations that are keeping that from happening, etc. I mean, it depends a little bit on the sector what the solution would be. But the critical thing is to broaden and sustain the productivity growth. And on the demand side, both from the household consumption as well as the investment side, we would look to see more incentives to invest. One of the things is clearly to think of setting higher standards and investing in sustainable development goals and climate. I mean, we have seen that in the past. Some of the challenges of setting a technology challenge have enabled many of the companies to rise to the challenge and make those investments and change. And of course, supporting income and consumption, making sure that some of the households don't fall through the cracks as we see the stimulus support to the low-income households end, and ensure that we see the productivity gains flow through to median wages, not just average wages across the board. So with that, I'll leave you with, I hope an optimistic message that the potential is there, but we have a lot of work to do, both on the company side as well as on the government and social sector side.
Thank you so much, Jaana. Thank you for that presentation. Before we get to our next guest, let's take a look at the results from our first question. You can see there the answer. The question was Canada's biggest digital strength, and 45% said talent. So we're going to now get to another question. For Canada to excel digitally, which is most important? So you can vote, and then we will talk to you about the results again after. You're watching The Data Effect, Canada's digital imperative, brought to you by CityAge in partnership with Canada's digital supercluster. Now, on to the next part of the show, a conversation between two of Canada's most visionary leaders in tech. Chris Albinson is the CEO and president of Communitech, equipped with a unique vision for how Canada can lead the world in tech. He's a seasoned tech investor and a longtime champion for Canadian innovators in Silicon Valley. Speaking with Chris is Paul Vallee, founder and CEO of Tehama. Paul started envisioning a world where you could work from anywhere long before 2020. He imagined it back in 1997. Thank you for that, Paul. He's a future of work entrepreneur, and in the post-COVID world continues to focus on cybersecurity and tech that unlocks maximum human potential. Guiding this conversation is Meagan Simpson, associate editor of Beta. She's a tech writer who's super proud to showcase the Canadian tech scene and has a background in almost every type of journalism, from sports to politics. Meagan, take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Naomi. Yeah, happy to be here from BetaKit, but that's okay. Yeah, so really excited to be chatting here with Chris and Paul today about digital competitiveness. Digital competitiveness, the ability of the economy to adopt and lead in digital spaces, from environmental practice or government practices and policies to business models, all kind of stuff like that. And as Jaana so eloquently shared, COVID has created an environment where digital is thriving, and there are markets and areas to seize opportunity. You know, somewhere Canada has expertise like AI. At the same time, we're having a moment with high-performing companies, you know, a lot of sizable rounds of investments, big exits, IPOs, all sorts of things. But Canada has also struggled when it comes to digital competitiveness. You look at Bloomberg's 2020 Innovation Index, we were at 22. We did jump up this year to 21, and the World Economic Forum has said Canada's been able to advance its digital competitiveness, you know, quite well between 2018 and 2020. But, you know, there's still room, obviously, for improvement, and it's long been a topic of discussion. So I'm really excited to have Chris and Paul here today. I won't take up too much time. I'll really let them have kind of the crux of the conversation here. But yeah, so Chris and Paul, I would love to start off with, in each of your own words, how Canada is doing when it comes to digital competitiveness when we look at other countries. So Chris, why don't you start us off high level? How do you feel Canada compares to other countries in your experience?
Yeah, I'm actually super excited about where we are. I think, the brass ring is literally, just in front of us. If you look at the, Canada from a global point of view, the innovation cluster that's really from Waterloo to Toronto is now the second largest on the planet and the fastest growing by 4x. If you look at capital flows that have come in, to your point, so that's also a great leading indicator of sort of what the trajectory is. Canadian startups and our founders coast to coast have raised more money this calendar year than they raised in the previous 10 years combined. So I think there's not only a recognition of the talent coming into Canada, the companies and the founders that are leading that and the impact they're having, I think is really exciting. But I think to the earlier point, it's not evenly distributed across the country. Here at Communitech, we worked on something called Digital Main Street with the federal government during COVID to help small businesses and basically helped 8,000 small businesses across Southwestern Ontario move during COVID, everything from nail salons to restaurants to become digital and be able to and move the needle. I think there's a lot of work to do, but I also think the brass ring is literally right in front of us.
Paul, same question goes to you. How do you feel Canada compares and where we are right now?
Well, Canada has definitely, I agree with Chris. Broadly speaking, we are in a good place. When Chris says the brass ring is right in front of us, I think he's also simultaneously saying that, we have not yet captured it. And I think that is a definite fact. We have challenges in Canada around catching up to jurisdictions, second-tier jurisdictions like Israel, where Israel has successfully navigated compliance with the World Trade Organization while still creating a definite opportunity for local businesses to punch above their weight in local regional procurement opportunities, especially government procurement opportunities. I think we have an opportunity to innovate on the privacy and data file, which is again right in front of us. But we have not yet achieved in terms of, it would seem that our government's goals right now are primarily around compatibility with the GDPR as opposed to furthering our innovation agenda beyond that. And I think Canada continues to have, despite Chris's quite correct description of our progress, continues to suffer from access to capital challenges where the amount of specialized capital available in Canada still remains well below and even proportionate to our success, well below that of that available to American businesses. So there are challenges and opportunities in front of us, no doubt.
Well, I think that's a great place to jump in. Like what particular, you've talked about, exciting stuff and challenges as well, and kind of highlighted both. And I'd love to dive into both of those with yourself and Chris. But what particular areas excite you right now about where Canada is digitally? What kind of opportunities do you see? And Chris, feel free to jump in at any time as well to share when Paul has some thoughts on that.
Yeah, happy to join in a second. Go ahead, Paul.
Oh, well, the most important opportunity that I see right now is that, as we're renewing our approach to privacy, we're doing that simultaneously at a moment when there is a crisis in trust. So we definitely have an opportunity to innovate on the trust file in Canada. We have seen Canada take a leadership role in matters of global trust in the past. I think we are in a position to do so again. As part of my work on the CIO Strategy Council, I advocated for the idea that large businesses in Canada, including publicly traded businesses and the government, should be required to employ a CIO who is responsible for the data governance and responsible for unlocking the power of the data while putting the public interest paramount, which is not the case today and is what's leading to some of these trust crises. So there is an innovation opportunity on the trust side. And then I think there's a massive innovation opportunity that I continue to be advocating for around the power of personal data about us to be unlocked to our benefit. I think that the way that our data economy is currently structured puts too much power and influence in the hands of the not made in Canada data monopolies, the Facebook, Apple, the Googles of the world tend to hold so much data about us and are really the only party that can unlock the power of that data. I dream of a world where we can create a distributed entrepreneurship opportunity, a made in Canada entrepreneurship opportunity, so that when Canadians have provided data about them to these foreign multinationals, we can also unlock that data to our benefit, which is not currently the case. So I think there's a lot of really cool ideas circulating in the industry right now. Some of these will take the shape of data trust. Some of them will take the shape of API-driven data access. Some will take the shape of non-prescriptive, non-technological innovations, but simply innovations in our governance and privacy landscape that I think could all be put together in a way that creates a massive opportunity in the data economy for Canada.
Paul, if I could just jump in there, because I think you're absolutely on the right path here, and I think a little bit of framing the opportunity I think is also important. So in an environment where $100 billion was just approved by the U.S. Congress earlier this year to go through the NSF for very intentionally dual-use technology to compete with China, I think it was actually framed as the Competitiveness Act, and competitiveness was framed as both military and commercialization. China has done the same thing. I think there's a global perspective, that technology, frankly, coming out of the United States and out of China is not trusted by other countries. And Europe has kind of taken a regulatory framework, I think, understandably in some ways, but really has limited its ability to innovate. To Paul's point, I think Canada has this amazing position globally where we're trusted. And if we can be the place where trust is actually built right into technology, and that becomes Canada's brand. Said a little bit tongue in cheek, but not entirely. Canada's the place where the robots don't kill the humans. If that becomes, the understanding of who we are, how we execute, and to Paul's point, actually take it the next level and make sure that we're implementing it, so that not only are we saying we're doing it, but it can be verified. So the same way you have a carbon audit on a business, or the same way you have a financial audit on a business, there's applied ethics that you can verify in how Canadians build technology. I think that sets us up for an immense opportunity where trust and technology come together. And I think that's really exciting in terms of Canada's position.
Yeah, and we have seen the federal government talk about ethics and AI, and I touched upon a little bit of this stuff, but would be interested, Chris, in your thoughts, and Paul, as you have them as well. How does Canada actually do that? How do we become the place where you trust the robots are not going to kill us?
Well, it's interesting. One of the Communitech members, ClearPath Robotics, actually made the declaration now 4 years ago about basically avoiding all dual use of robots and making sure that we're really living the tech for good ethos. But I think we need to go the step further. To your point, we need to have something like the Waterloo Protocol that basically defines what ethics and trust and transparency means in technology, that it's implementable in a way that works for startups, not large companies or large banks. I think that's the other thing that's missing right now. There's, if you've got $2 million in 5 years and you can pay IBM, you can do some of these big, ethics and transparency projects. I think we need to bring it into the place where SMBs can actually implement it. And then the last part of that is then we need to agree to that standard. And I know Paul's doing some great work on this, where it can actually be audited and verified by, folks like that audit your financials today, that they can say, okay, this is the standard and you've actually adhered to it. And the great thing about that is it not an esoteric technology. It's in everything, whether or not you look at Applied Board in education or Clio in legal services or companies in the agriculture space. This technology is affecting every sector in every part of the country. And so if we can basically come together and say, okay, this is, to your point, Meagan, this is what it looks like to build trust in technology. We agree to that standard and we agree to be held accountable to that standard. I think we're really close to being able to implement an applied ethical AI standard for the world. And when we did a really fun conversation about this earlier with Thomson Reuters and CityAge earlier in the year, I was blown away, frankly, by the OECD inbounding and the World Economic Forum inbounding in Belgium, and we had Netherlands in the building last week. I think the world actually would be really excited to see Canada take this leadership.
Yeah, if I may, as part of my work with the CIO Strategy Council, we have worked on a variety of standards, including everything from third-party access to data to remote workforce security and compliance, which are fundamental underpinnings to the trust issues. Just to point out, like, for example, there was a massive data trust issue as a result of RBC's outsourcing to India for personal data, including your banking transaction data. This was a concern. There is a way to secure that work, but in order to maintain your data depositors' trust, you need to be doing this correctly. But those standards also included ethical AI standards. Another important component, it harkens to history. But here in Canada, we also have a long history of innovation in the face of citizens' trust issues. In 1922, Haultain proposed the steel iron ring for engineers, which included an oath to put the public interest paramount. That oath of engineers and that requirement often regulated for engineers to sign off on the ethical dynamics of their project. That has now spread throughout the world, and we are in front of an opportunity again. To organize the nation's CIOs into a formal licensing body and maybe even eventual regulation into law. In order, many other fields of endeavor have done this. Accountants, nurses, vets, architects, dietitians, even early childhood educators have a licensing body. It is our opportunity to make sure that our technology and data governance leadership also organize into a licensing body that puts the kinds of promises that Chris just described into an actual actionable oath where your license to practice could be revoked in the event that you're found to not deliver on that oath. And in that case, I believe that we could elevate the citizens' trust, which is foundational to our innovation opportunity in the data practices. So it is not everything that we need to do, but I think it is an important component of what we need to do, is to craft a professional code of ethics, include in that an oath, include in that a licensing body, and then invite our governments to encode that licensing requirement eventually into regulation, which we're not there yet, but we have an opportunity to lead on that file.
Yeah, and I think that's actually a really good lead into what I was kind of thinking as you guys were discussing this is, obviously you're talking about a lot of the work that's coming from the private markets, whether it's ClearPath, Chris, that you're talking about, work being done at Communitech or the CIO Council. Should these sort of things be coming from the private markets, or how much of a buy-in do we need from the federal government to ensure that Canada is doing, having digital competitiveness on that global scale, right? Can it just come from the private markets? Is that enough?
My short answer is no. And I think, if you look at all of the great things that we've accomplished as a country, and just using a different metaphor for a second, on the podium, actually was born out of the 2002 Olympics in Salt Lake when our Canadian women beat the Americans for the first time in 50 years. Our first gold was awesome. But the athletes themselves basically said, like, why are we not winning more often? And from that became a woman that we should all celebrate as Canadians. Kathy Priestner basically said, look, we can't be the best in the world doing participation. We need to basically use data to find out where we have the probability of success, not the possibility of success, and look what's getting in our way and invest in those things so we can actually have that success. And I think we all celebrated the result of that in Vancouver and the 14 gold medals, but two numbers that people don't talk nearly enough about. Before, if you were top 3 in the world and Canadian and you went to the Olympics, you only ended up on the podium 17% of the time. After Vancouver, it was 56. So we went from third quartile to top quartile performance. And so as Canadians, I guess the point is, if we decide to do things and do them really well, we can have success. But to answer your question, Meagan, that started from the athletes. So again, using the metaphor, it's starting from industry, but ultimately government came in to fund that success path, as a partner. And I think ultimately we need to bring both of these streams together. And we've done it before. In sport, we can do it in innovation. I'm very confident of that.
Yeah, I agree. I think we have to be mindful of the fact that you can't innovate with regulation. You can't innovate by constraining actions. You can innovate with the kinds of funding strategies that Chris has just described. And I believe our government has done a good job of trying to put some wood behind their vision around funding. And I believe that a lot of the most innovative ideas will be born in the economy at large. And the government represents a single-digit percentage of our total economy. So it's a single-digit percentage chance of those ideas originating in government. So in other words, they get their fair share of innovation opportunity, but they don't have an outsized share of innovation. And I think it's a capitulation for us to believe that all innovation is going to come out of government ideas. The other thing is to recognize that government regulation is very slow. The reason the CIO Strategy Council, which includes government departments, the CIOs of the Government of Canada is the chair. But it also includes the CIOs of Canada's major businesses like banking and telecoms and electricity generation and distribution businesses are all included in the CIO Strategy Council. The reason that we're organizing these standards and these standards of care for ethical AI and these standards of care for third-party data access and so on and so forth is because standard setting bodies can act with alacrity in the event of emerging pressures, and regulation cannot do that, and laws cannot do that. And so eventually, the standards themselves that are successful can be encoded into law. And back to my example of the engineering oath eventually being encoded into law, it has been encoded into law now. The Professional Engineers Act of Ontario refers to the oath that the practitioner must regard their duty to the public welfare as paramount over the pressures of their business. And if we map that to the problems that are facing, the data and innovation economy today in Canada and across the world, we can think of the Facebook whistleblower. What was her name again? Haugen, I believe, Frances Haugen. She says that there were conflicts of interest between what was good for the public and what was good for Facebook. And Facebook over and over again chose to optimize for its own interests, like making more money versus the public's interest. Well, that's actually just normal. That's literally every business is supposed to optimize. It's even encoded into the SEC that you're supposed to work to maximize shareholder productivity. The reality is that the reason that these ethical rules and these licensing bodies exist is to create a reason to do the right thing. And that's where I think we have a major opportunity.
Really interesting. My next question, and then you guys have kind of touched upon this already, but I kind of want to dive in. What to you is Canada not doing well enough? I think, Chris, particularly, we've talked recently about domestic procurement, that sort of thing. I think that was a topic for you. So question for both of you, and Chris, let's start off with you. What is Canada not doing well when it comes to being digitally competitive on a global scale?
Yeah, so it's a thoughtful question, because I think the brass ring is in front of us, but it's probably equally possible we don't get it as we get it right now. So again, foundationally, we're the second largest innovation ecosystem on the planet and the fastest growing. So lots of things to be excited by that. If you look at on a global standard of outperformance, so the top 1% of highest performing private companies on the planet, Canada has a disproportionate number of them right now. We have 86 across the country. So again, using that own the podium metaphor, we've got athletes that can be on the podium, and lots of them. But if you look at them as a group and the funding that's come in, Meagan, you talked about it, 90% of that funding is domiciled in the United States, either directly or indirectly. 90% of their revenue is domiciled in the United States, either directly or indirectly. And so what I really worry about is, these companies could go one of two paths. They could go down the Instacart path, awesome company founded by Waterloo founders, now I think the fourth largest grocer in North America, great company, but I don't think any of us really think of them as a Canadian company today. Or they could go down the Shopify path that very proudly wears the maple leaf on their back, is domiciled here and growing here, and I think, a Canadian champion. And so what's the difference between those two, to get back to your question? We're the only country in the G7 that doesn't buy their own stuff. And if we don't have domestic procurement aligned with innovation, not only where our companies will not be rooted here, but the benefits of that innovation won't be realized in our healthcare sectors, won't be realized in our advanced manufacturing sectors. And so I think we have to take a big jump. The United States is very unabashed about Buy America right now. I think we need to have 15% of procurement that goes both on private and public into our Canadian controlled private corporations that are driving innovation, CCPCs. Beyond that, I think we need to figure out ways, because we haven't done it well for 15 years, how do we not only identify high performing companies and the innovation, but actually bring them together? And so actually yesterday, we announced our national partnership between Communitech and CanHealth to do that with 28 hospitals, $40 billion worth of procurement annually across Canada, and connecting them systemically with our highest performing innovators to get them grounded here. Another one, just to kind of quickly jump on, again, is 90% of the capital is also coming from the United States. And that's starting to influence the cap tables of these companies. It's starting to influence the boardrooms of these companies. And if we don't get our pensions and if we don't get our university endowments connected into the asset class, which by the way, they need to do as they decarbon, the things that they're investing in, they need to be investing in growth assets. And innovation in Canada is one of the best assets they could be moving to. But those relationships have been broken for 15 years. They're not connected. And so I think, again, this is like, the brass ring is right in front of us, with a little bit of effort and a little bit of focus on procurement and deepening growth capital in Canada. I think we've got a really, really great chance to get there, but there are challenges, to be clear.
Ultimately, the other thing is that we need to get more belligerent and active about intellectual property. Intellectual property is not only patents, and it is patents, and like obviously we must care about our patent portfolio, which has a major opportunity to improve, but we also need to care about data assets. So if data is the oil of the new economy, we need to realize that we are creating a circumstance where we are really a client state to the major data treasuries that are held outside our borders, even for data about Canadians held completely outside our borders. And we have opportunities to innovate in that direction. And I feel like it's a very important dimension of what Chris is alluding to, which is that in order for us to create a sustainable innovation economy in Canada, we must have intellectual property that is hosted in Canada, because the future of our economy is really about mining and monetizing the data about us, and creating innovation opportunities here for local entrepreneurs is really where we should be focusing our attention there.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. And I think we've heard, about IP and the importance of it to be competitive from lots of groups, including like the CCI and Jim Steely. And that was, question for you then, Paul. How integral is it, the education to startups, to entrepreneurs, to people, that they need to start taking care of their data assets, their IP, to be able to be competitive, right? Because if you take the looks of, say you compare, Shopify to Amazon, which isn't apples to apples, but it does get a lot of comparison. Shopify didn't start worrying about IP essentially on a notable scale until many, many years into its development. And Amazon has thousands and thousands of intellectual property rights. So how important is kind of the education for our entrepreneurs to ensure that happens? Because we can talk about it all day, I guess, right?
Yeah, I think, education is a part of it. I think there is also facilitation. There is ultimately, it is extremely challenging. I have been a technology entrepreneur for a long time. We've had absurd ideas around innovative ideas that were way out of the box. Our actual patent-based intellectual property portfolio still remains a couple that have been filed and not yet prosecuted through to granting. That is, that's, you could call that embarrassing for me, but I think the pattern that you're describing is exactly what we're talking about. We have a tendency in Canada to think that of a patent portfolio as being genuinely protective in nature, but they're not. They're really just defensive in nature. You mentioned Jim Balsley. He has done some advocacy around creating a patent war chest, a made in Canada patent, defensive patent portfolio trade, and where you can contribute to it, and then you can also draw from it defensively. I think that's really the future of intellectual property. The way that Amazon would attack Shopify, for example, is really by opening an intellectual property front where if Shopify is vulnerable to Amazon, but Amazon is not vulnerable to Shopify, that's how they win. If we can create mutually assured destruction, I think that would be good enough for a second-tier economy like Canada, and we don't have that yet.
We're coming to the near end of our time. Chris, just get you back in the conversation at the end here. If you could have, the viewers one takeaway about how Canada can be digitally competitive, what would it be?
I think we're almost there. We just need to make sure that the capital in Canada is investing appropriately and those flows are connected. And we need to start buying our own innovation. whether or not it's the TSX 30, our federal government, all across the board, if we are not buying innovation and supporting it domestically, the gravitational force of the US is going to take all the hard work over the last 10 years and we're going to lose it like a snowstorm in February. It's just going to drift south across the border. So I think it's really close. I'm very excited about what's in front of us, but we've got some work to do, especially on innovation procurement in the country.
Great. Well, not to cut either of you off, because I think we could talk about this for hours on end, but that is our time. So thank you both for chatting. I've enjoyed being able to have this conversation with you guys today.
Thanks, Meagan.
It was a privilege. Thank you, Meagan.
Thank you so much, Chris, Paul, and Meagan from BetaKit. Thanks again. Data is the oil to the new economy. I love that line, but a really interesting discussion there. So thank you again. I want to make mention that we have over 500 people registered and watching right now. So thank you all for joining us from all over. Before we get to our next poll question, I want to look at the results from the last poll. And the question, there are actually, pretty similar answers. So 28% said cultivate digital leadership and talent. 25% said support cross-industry collaboration. So we're going to get to another poll question right now. The question is, which industry is well positioned to digitize? So there you go. You guys can answer that question. And we're going to get started with our first panel. Canada's digital advantage in resources and sustainability, spotlighting some of the most innovative projects happening in our country through partnership with the Digital Supercluster. So please help me welcome our experts. First up is Darren Barker, Chief Digital Officer and Senior Vice President of the Global Supply Chain at Canfor. In partnership with the Supercluster, he's working to digitize the timber supply chain in Canada on the Forest Machine Connectivity Project. Next up is Charles Nyabeze, Vice President of Business Development and Commercialization at the Center for Excellence in Mining Innovation. He's passionate about connecting cross-sector innovation ecosystems, and with the Supercluster, he's also working on that as well. Next on our panel is Doug Brown, Vice President of Corporate Affairs at Tech Resources. Tech is partnering with the Supercluster on the Freshwater Data Commons project, developing new technologies to help protect freshwater supply. They're also working with the Supercluster to equip rural Canadians with digital skills they need to work in the future natural resources industry. Our final panelist is Yvonne Coady, a computer science professor at the University of Victoria and a visiting professor at Northeastern University. She's working on the Earth Data Store project with Supercluster, getting data to help us understand how certain regions are evolving over time to determine risk and potential strategies to combat climate change. Hosting the panel is Hayley, Woodin, Executive Editor of Business in Vancouver, correspondent for BBC's Business Matters, and currently a Master's in Journalism candidate at Columbia University in New York City. I'll leave it to you, Hayley.
Thank you very much, Naomi, and welcome again to all of our panelists. I'm really looking forward to discussing Canada's digital advantage in resources and sustainability with our panelists who have all given this topic really a significant amount of thought and are in many ways leading the space. Now, to maximize our time, we are going to dive right in. And why don't we start with what this wave of digitization that we've been speaking about will mean for key sectors in Canada's economy. And Darren, not to put you on the spot, but why don't we start with you? Share with us a little bit about what you think the digital future looks like for the forestry industry in Canada.
Yeah, thank you, Hayley, and happy to be here. The forest products industry historically has been a pretty conservative industry. And in our forest products industry today, digitizing our business, however, has become as integral as any capability we have. And when I say that, the way we define digitization is about leveraging technology to be more efficient, more effective, and more fulfilled. It's really a required capability that we have to be viable in our industry today and into the future. It's really that simple, and it's that important. And I'll give you a simple example. Think about the pandemic. And what if we hadn't had what seem like now such simple tools like Zoom and WebEx? And what's interesting about that question, however, is about the level of adoption prior to the pandemic. We had those tools, but what wasn't present was the cultural mindset and mandate to use them to their fullest potential. And what we're realizing more and more every day is the winners in our industry, or in any industry, will be the ones that can instill that sense of urgency, that discomfort with the current way of doing things to drive digital innovation in everything we do. You know, technology can be scary, but we need to be afraid of the right things, not the technology itself. Being overwhelmed by early adopters of technology is what we need to be afraid of, because they will win in our industry or in any industry.
Thank you for sharing, Darren, and for pointing out to the great example we've had with the pandemic of how we cannot adopt, or we need to adopt. We can no longer wait to embrace some of the changes that are taking place, for better or worse. Charles, why don't we go to you next? Tell us a bit about what you see the digital future looking like for the mining sector in Canada.
I unmuted. Okay, thank you. I'm really excited about what's happening in the Canadian mining industry because look, when the pandemic started, right, mining was deemed an essential industry. And that meant that, you know, business had to continue in the mining industry. And also one of the things that we're finding happening in the mining industry is that it's going remote or it's going really deep. And those two things are really calling for the industry to get really smart about how it gets connected to what's happening on the operational level. Sorry, I think someone is talking, sorry. There you go. Okay. Yeah. So what is happening in the industry is that there's a big need for the industry to become more transparent in how it understands how operations are doing the work that they need to get done to bring the resource to surface and to bring the resource to the end users. So there is this need for connectivity along the entire supply chain so that the information becomes more available for decision making to happen. The other thing that's happening in the Canadian mining industry is that the SMEs that are feeding innovation into the industry, these SMEs are actually now starting to come out of other sectors of the economy into the mining space. So the digital future of mining is actually being influenced by these SMEs from the other sectors that are bringing their technologies into the industry. Safety has always been a big issue in the mining industry. And what we're finding is that things like autonomous and using things like drones and sensor technologies, all these things are contributing to making the mining industry safer and be able to extract more productivity out of operations. I'm going to leave it at that for now because I don't want to take out too much from what Doug is going to say about what tech is doing, because he's also in the mining industry.
Yes, and actually, why don't we throw to Doug right now at Tech, one of the biggest players in this space. What do you see, Doug, as the digital future for mining?
Thanks, Hayley, and thanks, Charles, for that setup there and talking about the broader context for our industry. And I think, as you sort of hinted at there, for companies like Tech and for our industry overall, we're already pretty far down that digital future pathway. Digital innovation is rapidly transforming our sector, and it's fast become an essential part of ensuring that we stay competitive globally, that we can continue to meet the expectations of our stakeholders when it comes to environmental performance and transparency. The mobile equipment, sensors, and machinery at our sites, they produce enormous quantities of data, and we're analyzing that data, and we're finding ways to use it to improve so many aspects of what we do across our value chain. I'll give you one example to sort of highlight how that's been put into play. At our Highland Valley copper mine here in British Columbia, we're using machine learning to analyze massive quantities of sensor data from our processing plant there and provide automated real-time recommendations to the operators in the plant to help maximize the efficiency of that operation. And just that application of big data has led to an increase in copper production of about 8,000 tons per year. So essentially, we're producing more copper with less water and less energy, and that's improving our environmental performance as well as just the overall effectiveness and cost effectiveness of the operation. And it's not just machinery. We're putting digital sensors on people. We've placed connected wireless air monitors on workers at some of our sites to monitor real-time dust exposure and use those insights to improve our health and safety measures and keep people healthy and safe working at the mine site. So that's just a couple of examples, a small sample of how we're harnessing digital technology to become not only more cost effective, but also more sustainable, and how it's really driving the future of competitiveness and environmental sustainability in our industry.
Thank you, Doug. Yvonne, we'd love to hear from you now in terms of what you see the digital future looking like for the areas you engage in for work.
Well, thank you so much, Hayley and everyone, because I feel like this is the perfect setup for a computer science professor. Because really, I'm representing the students that are going into this space that are working on these problems. And I can tell you that we have highly motivated students. I can tell you that they're watching closely what's happening in the world. They're watching the climate conference. They have desires to get involved in these kinds of problems. And from a computer science perspective, I would say that the disruption here has been so great in the educational institutions that I've been involved with, because what's happening is many more people want to get involved, and we need many more programs to open the door, have many more diverse sets of students joining in. Maybe they've already got a degree and they want to get a master's degree in computer science, or they're coming through continuing studies and they might want to get some credits. And certainly the provincial government is supporting a lot of new initiatives with micro-credentialing. And we have so much to offer now for students to get up to speed with the skill sets that we've just heard are deeply needed. I think the other thing that I want to add in here is that these students are in demand in every sector. And they are looking for opportunities to align with their values. And so organizations that are showing the kind of commitment to transformation based on rigorous data analysis and certain transparency, they're the ones that the students are going to gravitate to, and I think further promote the transformation that we're talking about here today. So I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much, Hayley.
Well, thanks, Yvonne. And we'll stay with you for a moment as we go to this next question. But first, a quick comment. It's great to hear that you get to work with so many bright and engaged students who are going to lead us into the future that we need to see in business and in sustainability more broadly. Can you share with us any work that either you're working on or you're seeing take place, maybe your students are engaged in, that sort of reflects this digital imperative you described?
Sure. I think ultimately I would say that, collaborations are so key. And so it's easy for me to drop right into the Supercluster projects that we've been involved with. And this involves organizations like Earth Daily Analytics, Microsoft, Hatfield, Spark Geo, BC Parks, and I'm not even listing all of them. But I think what's really exciting is the opportunity to work on projects, especially from a computer science point of view, that have all of the pieces that are about massive data sets that need to, as we just heard, need to be processed real time to be able to extract information in a way that can be easily communicated to the human in the loop, and can continue to educate us about things like, what is the environmental impact of some kind of thing that we're doing here in this sector? Or what is the general impact on climate change? How do we get all of these data sets to coordinate to be able to give us these actionable items? And from a purely technical point of view, it's absolutely beautiful. I would build whole computer science programs around these problems for sure. But I also would say there's so many interesting connections to how we're educating and including more people in society to be able to bring their data sets into the story and to be able to work with the data that we have available. And I'm happy to dive into specific Supercluster projects, or I can do that in the next round.
Yeah, why don't we come back to you in the next round? I'll turn now to Charles. Tell us a little bit about the innovation and the work you're seeing that sort of exemplifies this digital imperative.
Yeah, look, mining is one of those integrated business systems, with many different sort of business units working together to make mining happen. And, when you think about mining, you got to think of it from the people that are looking for the resources and the people that are actually extracting the resource and the people that clean up afterwards. And along that whole spectrum, there's innovation happening that is advancing, the industry. So from a digital standpoint, when people are looking for resources, there's a lot of data that's being crunched. But what's been happening over the years is all this data has been collected and people haven't been able to really make sense out of it. But now that people are looking at things like AI and machine learning and kind of re-looking at the data, they're able to get more insights out of it. And then when you move over to the design side of mining, you find that now with things like digital twinning and use of VR, we're actually able to try things out before we actually put them into practice. There's a lot of that's happening as well. And when you look at the operations side, there's a lot of energy and momentum around things like autonomous equipment, and it's actually allowing diversity to actually come into the mining industry as well, because now you don't need 200-pound men to run these machines, right? You can have people like me, for example, operate the biggest machines autonomously. And so there's a lot of that's happening that's making mining a lot different. And also what's happening is decision-making systems within the mining industry, those decision-making systems are accelerating, and it's because information is becoming available. It's more transparency. Being such a complex mining industry, people have said that it's like playing a multi-level chess. Not everybody can play multi-level chess, at least not in this. Maybe if you're one of those Star Trek guys, or maybe if you're a Vulcan from Star Trek, you can play multi-level chess, but not everybody can. But with digitization and with things like AI and integration, things like machine learning, people are actually able to do complex tasks. So digitization is enabling human beings to do complex tasks within the industry. And I think those are some of the things that are really exciting for me right now in the industry.
Wonderful. Chess is hard enough, multi-level chess. I can't even begin to think about what that would involve. Doug, you shared with us earlier an example of what tech is doing in this space, but what other examples can you share with our audience today about sort of the way the company is working toward embracing this digital future?
Sure. Maybe I'll share a couple of examples we've been working on in the collaboration with the Supercluster and with some of the folks even on this panel today. So Yvonne mentioned that enormous skills need created by all this digital technology. One of the projects we've worked on is a wireless systems technician course created in collaboration with BCIT and the College of the Rockies in Cranbrook. Because really what is a mining job is changing, as Charles outlined there, and new types of jobs are being created to support all of the communications networks we need to handle and make sense of all that data. You need the infrastructure so all those sensors can talk to each other and feed all that data into the cloud so it could be looked at. So we've worked with BCIT, the College of the Rockies, like I said, to develop a training program for that specialized skill set. And that's currently in its second year of its first cohort. We're also gearing it towards in the region where we actually have operations, so the College of the Rockies in Cranbrook and Southeast BC, and also gearing the program to attract women, youth, and Indigenous participants who may have been traditionally underrepresented in this kind of training, and also making it available, like I said, on the ground in the region where the jobs are needed. And maybe I'll just mention one other one. A second was a freshwater data commons project we've been working on with the University of Victoria, Living Lakes Canada, and Carl Data. And that's really about, you look at environmental monitoring, it's been traditionally sort of involved sending a person out into the field with a chemistry kit to sample water. Maybe they would do that a few times a year. But through this project, we're deploying now low-powered, low-cost sensors that collect real-time data in the watershed and use long-range wireless to transmit that data to a collector and stream it to the cloud for analysis. So that can revolutionize how we get data about conditions in the watershed. It can revolutionize then the systems we put in place to manage environmental conditions. And instead of just getting that once in a while snapshot through physical testing with a person in the field, we're actually getting a constant stream of data. So you can get a real, a changing, evolving image of conditions rather than this one-time snapshot. So you can really see how that kind of technology could have so many more applications, both within mining and without.
Absolutely. Those are wonderful examples. Thank you for sharing. Darren, tell us what's happening at Canfor and what the company is doing to prepare and embrace this digital future.
Yeah, thanks, Hayley. I would just say simply, I think my role is a great example of how we're changing our approach. 5 years ago, you wouldn't have seen the integration of supply chain and digital explicitly ingrained in the organizational culture of a forest products company. You also wouldn't have seen in the key business strategies digital transformation explicitly spelled out. And the reality is technology has caught up with the complexity of our very long, complex supply chains, starting in the beautiful forests of Canada and ending up with customers all over the globe. And so that integration organizationally of where digital resides, I think conveys the importance. And the reality is, I think this is true for our industry, but I think it's true for all industries. All world-class supply chain organizations are digital supply chain organizations.
Absolutely. Darren, I'll stay with you for this next question. Can you share with us a little bit about what Canfor is doing in terms of its Supercluster partnership?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a couple really exciting initiatives going on. I'll talk about one of them. It's what we call force machine connectivity. And that's all about transforming and modernizing our timber harvesting. You know, we spend a lot of money, about $250 million a year in our harvesting of timber. And our costs keep going up, especially in the environment we're in now. But our productivity has been stagnant, and this erodes our competitiveness globally. And what the Force Machine Connectivity Project will allow us to do is to monitor the productivity of our timber harvesters, allowing us to collect and share data across our entire portfolio of harvesters. And what we can do with that is identify best practices, as well as monitor equipment, machine performance, and downtime to better schedule things like preventative maintenance, all with the goal of improving productivity and therefore improving our competitiveness globally. It also supports through this our sustainability strategy by reducing the energy that we consume through our timber harvesting, which is really important to us. It makes Canfor greener and cleaner and a better neighbor in the communities where we operate.
Thank you. Yvonne, I'll come back to you now. You teased a little bit your work that you're doing with the Supercluster. Now's the time. Tell us more about what you're doing.
Just wanted to plant the seed there. Yeah, the Earth Data Store and a related project, the satellite-based environmental analytics. This is all about, if I was to put it in very general terms, the idea is you've all used Google Maps and you've all kind of maybe clicked on the satellite view of your house and then kind of gone, oh, that's cool. But maybe the thing that you weren't able to do with all of that was ask questions of that satellite image to say, hey, if I was curious about what this area was like before something happened and after, whether it be wildfires or some kind of environmental impact effect, it's not that kind of platform. So really, the Earth Data Store and the related project, the satellite-based environmental analytics, is all about being able to build a platform that will allow people to interact with these data sets and query them and potentially add their own parts of data from, say, for example, we've heard about IoT or the Internet of Things, sensors gathering all this data from some of the processes here today. How do we add that in, and how do we get more informed and rigorous ways to deal with all the data? As Charles said, there's no shortage. We've got a lot of data. How do we do this? And the projects that we work on in the earlier session, there was a talk about a data trust or a data commons. How do we do this in a way? How do we build these platforms that can incorporate these massive amounts of data and allow for this real-time interactive querying to provide the decision support that we need to be doing with these kinds of projects that are going to take on things like climate change and other environmental impact events. So the real thrust of the project really comes down to a collaboration of people that are from geography and from remote sensing and from computer science and all of the related industries around. And I think the value that we've seen in the project is the innovation that comes from collaboration. And the students have been able to work with not just one representation in that kind of problem set, but with multiple partners working together. And within that collaboration, in those consortiums, we've seen hundreds of students work, and this is just with these projects, hundreds of students work with all of these partners because the partners are invested in the students. They realize that the students are a high value human capital proposition. And so that kind of project really captures the values of our students and really gets us together with highly collaborative groups that are all about innovation. So it's great.
It's very exciting. Thank you for sharing. Charles, I'll come to you now. Maybe you can speak to the extent to which you're seeing collaboration in the industry and the kinds of innovations you are seeing now or expect to see in the short to medium term on this front.
Yeah, thank you. You know, the Center for Excellence in Mining Innovation is really in the business of accelerating innovation into the mining industry. And the reason I say that is, you know, one of the Supercluster projects that we are involved with is about bringing the advances in the human genome into the mining industry, you know, for the purposes of resource discovery and also, you know, better mechanisms, greener mechanisms for resource extraction. And look, I was on the Supercluster project selection committee and I came across projects and technologies that are in the healthcare sector. For example, you know, imaging technologies in healthcare that I realized that, you know what, all I need to do here is change the word from healthcare to mining and it will be applicable. You know, I came across technologies from forestry, you know, that we're looking at how to better assess, you know, and I think Darren, you know, you see many of these, you know, projects in the forestry industry that are looking at just better ways of managing the forest. And I said to myself, you know what, this is applicable to mining. And then, you know, in agriculture, the same thing, space resources, you know, recycling, for example, you know, and also in the social sciences and also smart technologies, you know, that are leveraging things like AI, machine learning, that are looking at other sectors of the economy and yet have applications in mining. So I guess my real message to the digital economy of Canada is, look here, your technologies are actually applicable to mining. And I think the Supercluster has provided a platform to flush these out. Now it's a matter of just connecting them to what's happening in the mining industry. So there's huge opportunities for that. And I think this is an opportunity that Canada can take advantage of to really accelerate how we take advantage of the digital economy.
Thank you. We have just a few minutes left, but I think that we should maybe end on why this is important. It was hinted at by some of the panelists. It's a business imperative, it's an environmental imperative. Doug, I'll come to you on this in about 20, 30 seconds to provide some final remarks, but also why this type of innovation is important to tech.
Yeah, I think, I mean, essentially, being able to work collaboratively and innovate in this fashion with different organizations, different companies, different individuals outside of our traditional mining space, I think that's hugely important. It's something we need to do across all industries and sectors. We need to tap into the expertise and ingenuity of all sorts of individuals and people, solve challenges in new and creative ways, and really harness all of that data and that technology to improve how we do business. That's making us better. It's making us better in environmental performance. It's making us more efficient, and it's helping us make sure we continue to meet the needs and expectations of our stakeholders where we work. And that's critically important for any industry that wants to be successful in this day and age. So I think it's really the forefront of what where we need to be going as a mining sector, but also where Canada needs to be going in terms of taking hold of this opportunity.
Thank you very much. Yvonne, final 10-second, 20-second remark on why this is important to you.
Great collaboration is contagious. From these projects, we have more collaborative partners. We're working exactly as Charles was saying to all of this innovation, mixed reality, all of these things come to bear on all of these problems. Our students are ready to own the podium in Canada.
Fantastic. Charles?
Yeah, I would end by saying that, look, I think digital is an enabler for business continuity. And I think we've seen this, that, you know, look, we here in the West, we can only compete by being innovative, you know, not about, you know, how many people we get working on a project, but by being smart. So the way we're going to advance in the future is by digitally enabling every part of our operation and really end up with that connected environment in our businesses.
Thank you. And final word goes to Darren. Over to you.
Thanks. You know, at Canfor, we talk about stumbling our way to progress relative to digital. There are so many technologies available today, with more seemingly available every day. What do we decide to implement? You know, we aren't always going to get it right, and that's okay. But by collaborating with external experts and knowledge networks like the Digital Supercluster, that gives us the best chance to be successful faster. And that's what being part of the Supercluster provides to us. It allows us to move quicker and to be smarter than we can on our own.
Thank you. And thanks to all our panelists for the really engaging discussion. Naomi, back to you.
Thank you so much, Hayley, and to all of you. That panel had a lot of energy, so thank you all. Great discussion. Here are the results from our last question, and they actually are really interesting results because they relate to our next panel, because the top answer there was which industry is well positioned to digitize, and 36% said healthcare. We're now going to get to our last question. One more question for you. The question is, what's the most exciting effect of digitization? So there you go. You can answer that one. You are watching The Data Effect, Canada's digital imperative, brought to you by CityAge in partnership with Canada's Digital Supercluster. Now for our next panel discussion, Canada's digital advantage in health and wellness. I mentioned we would be talking about healthcare. We're talking about the investments major Canadian institutions are making in digital health and wellness to help Canadians lead better lives and build new footholds in global markets. So I'm going to introduce you now to the panelists. First up is Dr. Diane McIntosh, Chief Neuroscience Officer at TELUS. She optimizes all of their mental health related products, services, and innovations. TELUS is partnering with the Supercluster on an approach to prescribe Canadians medication based on their genetics, reducing adverse reactions. Next up is Iain Begg, Managing Director of Innovation Partnerships at the University of British Columbia. UBC is working with the Supercluster on several projects. Iain's going to tell us about two of them, one that's developing handheld ultrasound devices. I was just reading about that. It sounds amazing, powered by AI for remote and Indigenous communities, and one using blockchain technology to integrate personal health data, making it accessible all in one place. And next is Fanny C, Head of Artificial Intelligence and Digital Health at Roche. In partnership with the Supercluster, Roche is working on the Autism Sharing Initiative, a project focused on building the first federated and fully protected global network for sharing data that will accelerate autism research and develop precision healthcare approaches. Our final panelist is Mark Fume, co-founder and CEO at DNA Stack. DNA Stack is the project lead on the Autism Sharing Initiative that I just mentioned, and COVID Cloud, a project that has developed an all-in-one solution to sharing data, helping us understand, predict, and treat COVID-19. And hosting our panel is me. So I want to go right into the questions there and start us right in, because I don't want us to run out of time. I know we have a lot to discuss. So I want to start with this. Can each of you tell me what you see as the digital future in your industry and in your work? Who wants to take the first step?
I'm happy to go first. And
okay, thanks, Fanny.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us here. And I just wanted to comment on the panel that was just presented. I feel like everything that they had mentioned was very much translatable to healthcare. And I feel like there's discussions that need to be had thereafter, because this is part of the value proposition of the Supercluster, bringing different sectors together so that they can lean on each other. Because in healthcare, we have a respective risk profile, whereas it might not be the same as mining. So there's lots that we can leverage and learn from each other. So from the healthcare perspective at Roche, we are undergoing a very significant transformation, which includes a large component of that is through digital tools and through digital insights. So we originally and are traditionally known as a pharma company, but now we are transforming into a health solutions company. This means that our focus is not on just the drug or diagnostic, but we are focused on the entire patient journey experience. With the focus on the patient journey experience, we are driven by data and we are driven by the insights that are generated by them. So not only are we using it to accelerate the time to developing new therapeutics or biomarkers for earlier diagnosis, we are also getting involved in things like population health and supply chain, because an efficient system is something that we believe is a sustainable one. The other areas that we are growing in is inclusion in a ecosystem where there are a number of players in the public and private domain working very closely together. And that is, again, another way the Supercluster is really providing an advantage to Canada, where they're providing a platform for these players to come to the table, define very specific objectives and execute against them. And so, part of our contribution to that is that we've built a One Roche Artificial Intelligence Center of Excellence. It's called AI with Roche, where we bring public and private stakeholders together to really unify under single challenges in the areas of COVID as well as neurodegeneration. And we feel that not only does this invite people from the healthcare sector to participate in a unified effort, it also invites people from non-traditional sectors to come and join us and integrate their data sets such that we can create a better life for people in the healthcare system.
Thank you, Fanny. Iain, how about you? Can you tell us about what you see as a digital future in your industry?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for asking. At UBC, we're a large university, and so we're finding that digital is absolutely pervasive across the university, across the healthcare. For instance, we're drug discovery, whether it's understanding how things work, how the spike protein in the COVID virus works, but also what we're looking at is a number of different areas that are interconnected that have been alluded to before. So telehealth in particular, this is not about just diagnosis, this is about procedures. So I'm going to talk about one of those shortly. But it's very important around, especially in BC, where so much of the population is rural and remote. Mm-hmm. AR, VR plays a very key role in this. And of course, machine learning and AI provide the backbone. I mean, they're in everything. But one of the other interesting areas is that as you look at this, we're seeing two real drivers. One is decentralized control, and second is data portability, data privacy. And that was mentioned in the previous sessions, but it's really important to remember that when you bring in 5G networks, for instance, and you're doing edge computing, you've got to control what's happening with your data in these places. And so there's a real need for trust and assurance in these distributed transactions. And one of the other project I'm going to talk to talks to that as well. Thanks.
Okay, great. Mark, how about you?
Thanks, Naomi. Yeah, our DNA Stack is in the area of genomics, and we collaborate with Fanny and follow the work of Iain. So I'll sort of double click on what we see as being opportunities in genomics and precision health. What an awesome point in time we are. It's a time where we can look at the molecular blueprint of our kids, our grandparents, our parents, a virus, and understand with molecular precision what makes us sick. We've lived through this with COVID, where this pesky little 30,000 base pair molecule is wreaking havoc on the way we live. And using this technology, we were able to digitize the genome, isolate a therapeutic target, and develop a vaccine in months. It's incredible. And we can continue to use this technology to monitor this virus, and we're just scratching the surface. The kinds of technologies that we've demonstrated in our response to COVID, I think are going to have profound effects over the next 10 years in terms of our ability to break down barriers and create some exciting therapeutics for all kinds of different disease areas. So we think that health and economic value of genomics and precision medicine has proven itself in infectious disease and complex disorders like autism and cancer. What we need now is infrastructure that enables us to implement this at national and planet scale. And the opportunity to work together with partners here in the Supercluster is exactly what we need right now in order to make that reality true. And so, I'll echo some of the themes that Fanny and Iain has mentioned. I think you're spot on. Decentralization, control, data sharing, AI, all really important themes of the future. So thank you.
Mark, it's so true. I mean, we always talk about, a lot of people talk about the negatives of COVID, but there are going to be a lot of positives that come out, and you're right. It's going to be interesting to see how we move on from this in a positive way, and especially in terms of healthcare and digitizing it. Diane, I'm wondering if you can talk to me a bit about the importance of digitizing mental health in Canada and why it's so important that we invest in that.
Sure. Well, just to remind everyone, I'm a psychiatrist and a bit of a tech moron, so I keep that in mind as I speak. But after my 2 years at TELUS, really, I've come to believe that the future of healthcare, including mental health care, is digital, and it has to be rooted in a really thoughtfully structured clinical data strategy, including the capacity to do something with that data once you've got it. So that data analytics experience. Iain, when you're talking about how, UBC, big university, and what did you say, digital is pervasive, but I guess on the ground as a clinician, I don't experience it the same way. So I was interested in hearing what you were saying, but I guess in order for us to sort of fully be able to take advantage of what everyone is talking about here, we need to make sure we're choosing the right data thoughtfully, safely, appropriately, because what we're trying to do is change the world for human beings, right? Improve clinical outcomes. And those outcomes aren't just sick, not sick, don't have as many auditory hallucinations. They're also things that are important to patients, the most meaningful things, like they're able to function, they have a better quality of life. So the couple of things that have really come to mind as I think about the challenges here are, one, that we're often facing these disparate data sets, right? We've got an electronic medical record in someone's office, plus the patient's been at the hospital. Maybe they're in a marginalized community. They're hard to house because they've got a serious mental illness and addiction. So we need the housing information, we need the police information, all of these things, pulling that data together, very challenging. Number two, we've all lived this with COVID. These data analytics need to be really agile, dynamic. They have to follow scientific advancement, and COVID was just the best example of this, right? We thought it was fomite spread. Now we know that it's spread through the air. We have to be able to continually upgrade and think about patient outcomes. Next is this fear, digital confusion that I live myself, as well as privacy, security, and inequity. It's great to have an app, but if you don't have access, then that's a challenge. And my most important thing here, guys, is compassion. We have to make sure that whatever we do from a digital perspective, digital technology perspective in healthcare, doesn't remove the humanity, the empathy, and the compassion in a system that is empathy impaired, to be honest. So that's my starting salvo into the conversation.
I couldn't agree anymore. As someone, my dad's actually a social worker and he does e-counseling. So you're right. I know he talks about, needing that personal connection, because e-counseling is not so personal sometimes when you're writing, but yeah, compassion is so important. So thank you for that, Diane. I want to talk about the work that you're all doing that reflects the future. So tell me about the Supercluster projects you're working on. I know we addressed some of them in my intro to you, and how they reflect the digital future in your own industry. So Mark, I know you were talking about it, and Iain as well, but I don't know who wants to start there. Fanny, maybe we'll go back to you.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about them. So the ones that we're most proud of is the Autism Sharing Initiative, as well as COVID Cloud that we're working on with DNA Stack. It's fantastic. Startup company who can be so much more nimble than a big company like Roche, but being able to actually aggregate data, normalize it, make it available to solutioners who could then advance targets and drug discovery and diagnostic tools for the future of healthcare. Like that those are the dreamy types of relationships that you work for, and that will build you that future that is the promised land of artificial intelligence. And without these types of consortiums, I don't think we'll get there. Like the brass ring will be in front of us, but it'll be a lost potential. So that's why these consortiums are particularly important. And from a translational perspective, these consortiums allow for not only data scientists to get together, infrastructure partners, but also clinicians, people who are experts in regulatory and reimbursement, such that when the discovery itself is ready to hit the market, that the entire ecosystem is ready to embrace it. And that is super, super key point. And I'll chime in a bit later and let Mark take the floor. Just too excited about it. Yeah.
That's good. Exciting is good. And Mark, I was actually watching a video about it before, and I know they use the word game changing to describe the supercluster.
It's incredible. Yeah, I think what Fanny says is all absolutely true. We all believe in the same future, I think, in healthcare. But the supercluster is really where the rubber hits the road. It's where you align a consortium of complementary partners around a shared vision to accelerate discoveries. And we've had the good fortune to work with patient advocacy groups, cloud providers, big pharma, small pharma, public sector, governments, other innovators who really care about the same thing, but really tactically work on a common goal. I think that's game changing. So with COVID Cloud, we've been able to partner with at the federal level to support Canada's response in distributing the viral genome sequence data as we see it. So 10% of positive cases have their whole genome sequenced of the virus, and we're using that to share and track variants. We're doing something very similar at the provincial level to provide a dashboard for the Ontario government to track and make decisions, data-driven decisions on the response. And in autism, we're just thrilled to be creating this worldwide now distributed network of genomics and biomedical data. And the goal, particularly with the Autism Project, is to show that we have a made in Canada pipeline for taking data off a sequencing machine and translating it all the way through to clinical and pharmaceutical impact. We're really excited about that. In both those projects, we're looking to affect digital transformation in ways that Iain will probably expand on. Digitalizing access, I think, is really important. How do we make sure that trust and security are maintained in an increasingly decentralized world of biomedical data? And then on top of that kind of network, how do we then transition from Excel spreadsheets to sophisticated AI and ML tools? And so we're incredibly excited about the future. And with Supercluster's support, we measure our progress in months now instead of years.
Wow, it's amazing. And yeah, as I said, I was watching that video before, and a father who was talking about how it's helped him with his son. I mean, do you want to provide a personal example, Fanny and Mark, about how it's helped people, some of the people that you've talked to?
Yeah, I can expand on the video for those who haven't seen it. So we received an unsolicited commentary on the value of what we're doing. It's a father of two twins that have autism. And what's really important to appreciate with autism is that autism is a spectrum and has very diverse symptoms and a lot of comorbidities. So in addition to the core attributes of autism, like social responsiveness or repetitive behaviors, they also deal with difficulty sleeping and alopecia, which is hair loss, and pain. And those other comorbidities are really distracting from helping your child learn to speak. And so through the Supercluster project, we now have the opportunity to do a whole genome scan and a multi-omic analysis to try to identify the root cause of this particular family's diagnostic odyssey that has lasted for now 9 years. This is just one kind of personal example of how we can with laser precision, start to look at treatments.
Yeah, as Diane was talking, that's the compassion, that's the human part of it. So Iain, why don't you tell us a little bit about the superclusters that you're working on?
Sure. And funnily enough, one of our leading autism researchers is working with both Fanny and Mark on this one. So it's very exciting. I want to talk about two projects. One is an imaging one called In Focus. It works with UBC, Providence Healthcare, Clarius, Change Healthcare, and the Rural Coordination Centre of BC. Now, I don't know about you, but when I look at an ultrasound image, I cannot tell anything. What this project does is uses AI to highlight what you should be looking at. And what they're doing is they're taking, the project has been very successful because it's taken portable ultrasound devices into the remote and rural areas so that people there can get an idea of what they're looking at without having to be part of the main centers and the main hospitals. So they don't have to send somebody in, they're working there. And to Diane's point, this is very much about engaging the people, the clients and the clinicians in giving them support where they need it in the field. It's also distributed here, and so this whole, we see that this is going to be an important way forward because the pandemic has shown that overcrowded hospitals don't really work. And so the more you can push out, the better. So we see this as an early example of one of these projects. Now, the other one is the personal health wallet. And this is with UBC Molecular Human Stone paper. And what they're doing is empowering individuals to take control of their own health data. It's very difficult to access your health data, and it's very difficult to keep it safe. So what they've done is they've embedded blockchain technology, a type of hyperledger, to track who accesses and how you can access your own health data so that you can distribute it. It's had a couple of interesting side effects. One is that it's been a hugely beneficial training exercise for our students, as well as the research, but also it's going to open up new markets. And potentially, if we've got time, I can talk to that a little bit later. All in all, we've got really exciting stuff going on through the Supercluster.
Yeah, no, it sounds amazing. Diane, maybe you want to delve a little bit more into digitizing mental health, more broadly, and what that means and what it's going to look like.
So I am very excited about what Iain just said and want to learn more about that. But
I see you taking notes, which is good. So hopefully a lot will come out of this panel discussion.
I'm a big note taker. Just from a personal perspective, a few years ago, I became a thoroughly burned out psychiatrist. And if you know anything about physician burnout or healthcare burnout, we have a big problem with this. And it was such a big surprise to me because taking care of my patients was really my passion. And what I've learned from that time, I think has really been invaluable in helping to drive at TELUS our approach to mental health care, but also to partner with some of the people here and other organizations. What we have as a system that's pretty broken from a mental health perspective, we call it a mental health care system, but it's not very healthy, it's not particularly caring, and it's not a system that's able to deliver, really. So there are some caring individuals, certainly, but that most people find it really difficult when they have a loved one or they themselves are trying to navigate the healthcare system, the mental healthcare system. They end up being frustrated, disillusioned, and really feeling pretty desperate about that. So just from my own professional life, I started to offer virtual care to my patients years ago. And I was very anxious about doing that because I thought, well, how are they going to react? How will they feel about this experience? And it was overwhelmingly positive that they didn't have to pay for childcare, didn't have to pay for parking, they didn't have to have time off work or travel or be in traffic. And what I realized is the barrier to offering virtual care is the clinicians. It's not the patients, if we do it well, that the medical system lacks curiosity, it lacks I guess they fear change. And of course, most of us are burned out, and that promotes this glacial movement and failure to change. But the pandemic has pushed this in our face. We must change. And I think my personal experience here is that, as I mentioned earlier, we need to gather the right data. We need to include clinical decision or data analytics needs to include creating digital decision-making systems, algorithm-based care, continuously improve through AI and machine learning. But it comes down to the clinician and the patient and how we build that relationship through these innovative technologies. That is the core, and the patient is at the core of that. They own their data. So that's why I was excited about what you were saying, Iain. They own their data. They own their experience. I am the navigator. They drive the ship.
Well, and you're right. COVID has pushed us there, right, Diane? So now we got to do it. Whereas you were maybe thinking about doing it before, now everyone's going to do it. So we're starting to run out of time here, unfortunately. So we're going to have to close off the discussion. But I have a last question for all of you. What kind of innovation has your partnership with Supercluster made possible, and how does that affect your vision of Canada's digital future? So maybe we'll go back to you, Fanny, and we'll go around again.
Sure, absolutely. I think it was echoed throughout the talk itself. It's really creating that pipeline from concept all the way to full translation, and allowing all of the players along that pipeline to meet and essentially align. So you have the startup innovators, you have academia, you have infrastructure players, you have people in healthcare institutions, and then companies like Roche that are able to to take these amazing gems and potentially elevate them and productize them in Canada, but also expand globally.
Mark, what do you think?
Great. For us, it's been the opportunity to build an enterprise-grade solution that doesn't just exist in the ether, but is deployed in real impactful projects like the current pandemic and neuroscience. So it's been a wonderful opportunity for us to tag team with the consortium partners to really enact the kind of digital transformation we're all caring about.
Amazing. And Iain, what kind of innovation do you think it's made possible by working with the Supercluster for you?
Well, probably two things. One is it enabled us to do a whole bunch of new and exciting research that will make its way into the market. But I think from a perspective point of view, it's shown that universities can work very collaboratively with industry to do some things that are going to have an impact. That's really our mandate. And it's been hugely successful for us.
Amazing. Diane, how about you?
I think most importantly, my experience with Supercluster is the relationships that can come from pulling all of these groups together and learning that we have more in common than we do have differences. So that's been a real plus.
Well, and look, developing relationships right here. So maybe you guys will have a discussion after. So thank you all for joining us and for talking about this. I really appreciate it and for being part of this panel. We are going to move on to the results from our final question. I'm just going to read those off my phone here. I was in the panel there, so let's just see. The answer there was, well, pretty even. So, 23%, 23%, and 21%. So improving the health and well-being of all Canadians, expedite post-pandemic recovery by building a more resilient economy, and a real and fair opportunity for success and a better quality of life, more competitiveness on the global scale. So everyone's sort of feeling the same there about that question. We're very excited now to introduce the Digital Supercluster's CEO, Sue Page. Sue leads more than a $300 million portfolio of digital innovation and talent building projects focused on keeping Canadians healthy, protecting our environment, and driving economic productivity. They do it all with over 1,000 industry, academic, and public sector partners, just like the ones you heard from today. Sue is here today to share some exciting developments with us. Sue, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Naomi. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Thanks very much. Thanks for the warm introduction and thanks for keeping us on time and task today. Hey, I always introduce myself the same way, which is I'm the very proud mom of 3 amazing young Canadian women and the grandmother of 3 teeny tiny Canadian little girls, and everything I do is to build a better Canada for them and all of their friends, which in some cases are many of you or your children. And that's why I'm here at the Supercluster. Thanks also to our partners at CityAge for your expertise and convening and producing today's event. And I also want to shout out a big thanks to Bill Tam, Stacey Gorikoff, Annika Lee, and the whole team working behind the scenes at the Digital Supercluster for making today's event happen. It's been quite a discussion. If you're joining us from anywhere east of Vancouver, thank you for investing your time in this discussion when you're likely seeing beautiful blue skies and sunshine outside your window. If you're joining us from BC, we're glad that we gave you an opportunity to escape the pouring rain. While weather in different parts of our country and our continent can vary day to day or even hour to hour, one thing is not going to vary. We're living in a digital world, and our panelists have confirmed this over and over again. Thank you, Jaana, Chris, Paul, Meagan, BetaKit, Hayley, Darren, Charles, Yvonne, Doug, Tara, Diane, Iain, Fanny, and Mark. You've helped us explore how COVID-19 unlocked new levels of productivity and digital innovation across global markets. Understanding that that brass ring is right in front of us, but we don't have it, not yet. Understanding how Canada can and must advance our competitiveness in the digital world. Remembering that talent is and is becoming one of our biggest strengths, and all of you in the audience confirmed that. Respecting the power of partnerships and procurement and the importance of trust. And the scope of Canada's digital advantage in natural resources and sustainability, in keeping Canadians safe, healthy, and well, when we move into the endemic state and beyond. You know, on the health and wellness front and listening today, I reflected on another part of my life where I co-chair the COVID-19 testing and screening expert panel, where we've witnessed firsthand over the past 20 months the development and deployment of digital solutions, data sharing agreements, collaboration and cooperation that we've never seen before in that sector. With all this generous and well-informed commentary from our speakers and leaders today, I think we're all likely asking ourselves, okay, what's next? We're at a moment in Canadian history, indeed in global history, one that shatters our collective historical illusion that there's the digital economy over here and somehow it's separate from the real world or the real economy. It's undeniable that our world is digital. It's not just the economy. In fact, it's not even business and industry. It's our society. It's healthcare, it's education, it's communities. It's every way we interact now is somehow influenced by digital. Put another way, that means digital transformation is not something we can aspire to, nor is it something we do off the side of our desk, nor is digital transformation something that we do according to a decade-long planning process. While we have a history in Canada of long and involved process, and we do love process, we're not living in history. The past is not our present, and it's certainly not our future. Digital is part of our lives, and we see it every day and everything we do. The pandemic has taught us many things, and one of them is that we can move quickly, with determination, with dispatch, and with a relentless focus on outcomes in every aspect of industry and society, in planning for our future economic prosperity, building that kind of Canada that we want for our kids and grandkids, in managing our acts and accessing our data, in protecting our environment, keeping Canadians safe and healthy, and growing our international presence and grabbing our global leadership potential. We need to move and look at things through a digital lens. Digital transformation is not something we did during the pandemic, and we're not going back to the way things were in February 2020, although just a few weeks ago, I was in a conversation with a business leader who actually said he couldn't wait for all of this to be over so that he could go back to the way we were. Chills ran down my spine. That cannot be our conversation. We have an enormous opportunity, and many of our speakers have identified that today, an opportunity for Canada to chart a prosperous, inclusive, sustainable, and sustained economic recovery and a return to prosperity. As Chris and Paul noted, we're a trusted country. What if we really aspire to be the country where we trust the robots? Each one of you on the screen and listening in today, you're part of this opportunity, the opportunity to leverage, demand, create, scale, generate, and reap the rewards of digital solutions. That opportunity is here and now. Like many of our speakers, I'm confident that Canada has a massive potential in the digital world to work together and learn from what we did over the last 20 months, to leverage the expertise and skills of our researchers and academics. And you identified our biggest strength, our people and our talent. Let's bring them together to encourage and engage our innovators and entrepreneurs, to welcome industry leaders, large and small, to buy Canadian and to be proud of doing that, to partner with governments and public sector organizations and demand that they be part of the conversation, and not just the conversation, part of developing and deploying the solutions, to deliver products, services, and opportunity, and to do this better together than any one of us could do on our own. And we need to act fast, because one thing I'm pretty sure about, the world's not waiting for Canada. While what I've said about the opportunity, acting fast, working together may sound obvious, even to the point of being trite, it's not. Working fast and collaboratively is not necessarily part of the Canadian fabric or heritage when it comes to industrial innovation. In fact, over the past 20 months, investment in research and development in Canada declined, while in virtually every other OECD nation, investment in R&D increased over the past 20 months. This result means that Canada's already lagging behind potentially in essential R&D that's critical to fuel many of the innovations and the inventions foundational to our future prosperity, and to advance some of the great ideas and technologies that you heard about today. And so
Yeah, I don't think enough time has come.
We have a massive, glad to have a conversation, but I'll carry on. I've said we have a massive opportunity. We can't wait. And as I've said, we have a history and a present that's slow. It's not founded on that own the podium mindset of Canadians winning. And so why the optimism? Well, I've seen what we can do, and I've seen it in a couple of sectors. As a member of the Own the Podium Board of Directors, I can tell you the power of focus, determination, commitment, a relentless drive to an outcome, and the power of athlete, industry, and government partnership. Or in the case of our innovation opportunity, I can feel the power of partnership between industry, academia, government, and you've all heard this from our panelists today. In our digital supercluster, we witness it every day, even every hour. The willingness and the excitement and the power of industry, academia, governments, and innovators working together. The results when we focus on solving wicked problems and do this with a focus on delivering outcomes through digital products and solutions, not being slave to a process that isn't focused on outcomes. When I look way back to 2017, there was nothing like what we're doing today in the digital supercluster. There were no industry partners, no partners working across sectors, no investments, no projects, and certainly no outcomes. And when I look at what we have now, over 1,000 organizations involved across Canada, over 80 projects very much focused on delivering products, services, IP that stays in Canada, jobs, revenue, and public good. I see us realizing the power of cross-sectoral collaboration, as Charles noted and Iain mentioned as well, and many of you have referenced in your comments. And I've seen results, real jobs saved and created, real data assets, real revenue for Canadians, real bridging of academia industry, and real engagement from government partners. Enough? No, but it started. And outcomes that benefit Canadians. Yes, they benefit Canadian industry, and they benefit Canadians in their homes, in their gardens, and in their communities. I'm just going to give you a few examples. You've heard some from our panelists. I'll just give you a couple. Telewound Canada is a project that's developing a technology solution for remote wound care. This mobile application that's already being deployed develops a 3D medical grade image of a wound so care providers can remotely monitor patients and provide care with 95% accuracy. Why do we care about wounds? Because 30 to 50% of elderly patients who are in care are suffering from a wound. It costs us $4 billion annually. The early results of this project show that costs are reducing by over 20% and access is increasing. Or the Emergency Food Distribution Network, where we've digitized food distribution so that we're feeding more people and wasting less food. That's good for all of us. Or protecting our oceans, which has created a data platform to identify and track dark vessels. Dark vessels are the boats that are engaged in illegal fishing. Why do we care about that? 12% of the global population's income is at risk because of illegal fishing. It's a $23 billion issue annually. This technology through this project is being deployed already in the Galapagos and Pacific Island states. And I could go on about the Autism Sharing Initiative, but you've already heard from Mark on that. And we've got even more unsolicited comments from parents who are saying, because of what these partners are doing through the Autism Sharing Initiative, you're changing our children's lives. So what you've heard today are not promises. This is real. And there are 70 other projects than the ones that I've just spoken about doing the same thing. It's not magic in a bottle. It's proof that we can indeed define, capture, and grow Canada's digital advantage. We can seriously advance our economy, our society, and important pillars of Canadian reality like healthcare, equity, and combating climate change. And that's why starting today, our digital supercluster is convening a big conversation about Canada's digital advantage. Today, we're launching a 90-day design sprint, not a long process, 90 days with holidays in the middle there. With you, we're going to explore and define how digital solutions can best help to solve some of the wicked problems continuing to face Canada and indeed the world. We're going to convene a national conversation and put smart people like you, your colleagues, your competitors, and your neighbors around a table to tackle things like the future of our healthcare system in the endemic world. How digitization can transform our traditional industries, like what we heard from Darren and Doug and Charles and Yvonne, industries that have historically powered economies across Canada for decades. How can we help them power our economies for the future decades? And how Canada can dominate in emerging fields driven by digitization and more. It's going to be much more than a conversation, though. It's going to be a practical exercise. We're giving it form and function, and we're going to share what we learn with the entire country. Over the next 90 days, we're bringing together a combination, maybe we could even call it a federation of Canadians who are passionate, concerned, and committed to delivering a digital future for Canada. We're going to host a 3-part event series and facilitate online conversations to build a digital framework for Canada. We'll publish our progress about the insights and the ideas generated through the conversation. And at the end of this 90 days, we're betting that we're going to have a dedicated, committed, and very large group of partners who want to lead new projects and new initiatives to push Canada forward, to grab that brass ring. Our goal is to inspire ideas and initiatives that are going to boost our productivity relative to other nations. Initiatives that will put Canada center stage in developing and scaling and deploying meaningful and world-leading digital solutions. And a collective that's going to result in increased public and private sector investments in digital technology. And all this will indeed build a better Canada. Isn't that what we all want for our families? We know that a collaborative approach is just what we need to drive Canada's digital advantage. This is a global race for excellence. The starting gun has just gone off. Now's the time for us to pick up the pace, and we're going to do that. As you leave today's event and consider the opportunity in front of us, I urge you to join us in the 90-day sprint. You can sign up, and hopefully you're seeing on your screen some information about that. If not, we're going to get in touch with you. You can learn more about what we're doing and join the conversation and movement. You can help us solve wicked problems for Canada, and you can help us own the digital platform. Together, we're going to create Canada's digital advantage. Thanks very much, everyone.
Oh, so exciting. Thank you so much, Sue. Lots of food for thought and a really exciting announcement there. So thank you again. I know you said we're at a moment in time, and we really are. So that wraps up this edition of The Data Effect, Canada's Digital Imperative. Thanks to our guest attendees and, of course, our sponsor and partner, Canada's Digital Supercluster. We hope you got a glimpse into Canada's promising digital future and are ready to seize the once-in-a-generation opportunity we have to accelerate our digitization in a world transformed. We're continuing the conversation on Canada's digital tech strategy on November 23rd. We invite you to join us by visiting cityage.com for more information. Until next time, stay well, stay healthy, and thank you all for joining us today.